On Primetime Politics, tensions exposed.
You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
But you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Donald Trump and the Ukrainian president exchange heated words after the U.S. vice president defends peace talks with Russia. Where does this leave Ukraine's defense, and how will Trump's engagement with Russia affect Western security? This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Disagreements and frustrations between foreign leaders are rarely exposed for the world to see, but that is exactly what was revealed today in Washington as a news conference with Presidents Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy descended into a shouting match. This after the American vice president defended peace talks with Russia and Zelenskyy pushed back, warning J.D. Vance of putting too much trust in the Russians.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's back to you, far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again,
I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of
except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you what,
that wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
That was with Obama. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a tough deal to make, because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden, because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia, the 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think, huh?
Now, after that exchange, the Ukrainian delegation was asked to leave the White House, told by Donald Trump on social media to come back only after Zelenskyy is ready for peace. President Zelenskyy did go to Washington to sign a deal with the U.S. on Ukrainian critical minerals, but no deal was signed today, leaving into question how much support Ukraine can expect from Washington and the future of any peace deal.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Jeremy Kinsman is a former Canadian ambassador to Russia. He is currently a distinguished fellow with the Canadian International Council. He also hosts the Red Passport podcast. Mr. Kinsman, good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you, Michael. Thank you.
Listen, I have to start out with just how troubling it is, in your viewpoint, to see the kind of yelling match that we've now seen between presumed allies.
I'm trying to find the word, Michael, and I guess I'm going to come up with disgusting, frankly. It was disgusting what happened to Zelenskyy in there. And I disliked enormously the impression it gave, which Trump, of course, has given virtually all his life, of one side trying to dominate another. Zelenskyy has a very legitimate question. He cannot, on behalf of his embattled and very, very hurt people, enter into a truce without some kind of backup security that if Russia attacks again, he deeply distrusts Putin, that he can't do it. He can't do that, and it's a fundamental minimum requirement he has, and Trump, as a self-appointed mediator, has got to respect the minimum requirements of the two parties to the conflict. Anyway, it was the language and the projection of what would you say, of just of superiority. I watching Zelensky's face. Of course, he was an actor, and he can control his face as an actor, but he could not control his face when Trump riffed on about, incompetent Joe Biden, and if I'd been president, and I trust Putin. He just couldn't believe what he was hearing, and I couldn't either.
Mm-hmm. So what does it say then about how much support the United States is willing to give Ukraine going forward? How much Ukraine can trust the United States to negotiate with Russia and end to the war?
Every one of America's allies, of course, all the Europeans, and very much ourselves, and in our position, our victimized position as the targeted 51st state, we have to ask ourselves, what does this say about the United States position on anything? It's just they're breaking so many norms. And I'm not just talking about, vocal behavior in the Oval Office. I mean, undoing basic assumptions about commitment to the rule of law, and to, of course, the various organizations and alliances and institutions that are meant to sort of cement it. That it's impossible to know. It could be Zelensky, as far as I can see, isn't leaving town yet. It could be that this is a tough part of the negotiation when parties slam their books, their notes down the table and say, okay, that's it, I'm out of here, as a pressure tactic. Or the host says, well, look, there's no point in going on. You come back when you're ready to come a little farther toward us. It could be such a moment. And if so, it would be a very therapeutic moment. But it seems to me that it does reveal a real breakdown. And it's terrible, because I'm looking out here over the harbor of Victoria, and I remember all of the wonderful blue and yellow flags that were hanging over all of these buildings, and people out there demonstrating on behalf of Ukraine. And it's such a blow to these 3 years of support of this country that was invaded by its much larger neighbor, who had the aim of conquering it totally. It is such a letdown, and I can't imagine, if I feel this over here, what Zelensky must feel now.
Well, and without a doubt,
the burden of responsibility is just enormous.
And without a doubt, Ukraine will feel it first, because they have been fighting this war, this illegal war launched by Russia on the front lines. They are now, it seems, being questioned by the U.S. administration. What does Canada need to take away from this, though? Because, if the United States is abandoning the international rules-based order, which many foreign policy experts say is what we are witnessing right now, how does Canada need to prepare? Because you mentioned it yourself. This is an administration that also talks about annexing this country.
Yeah, well, I think what we're taking from it, we're growing up as with each day. We're getting a little older and a little wiser. I think that there seems to be pretty much a political consensus, certainly as far as the Liberal Party is concerned. I mean, from the Tuesday night's debate, but I would accept also from the Conservative Party, very much from the NDP, that we have to certainly stand by Ukraine. That's a fact. To the extent that we can, we'll stand by Ukraine. And Trudeau mentioned even possibly participating in such a military presence, multi-country military presence in Ukraine once there is a peace. What do we take from it vis-a-vis the United States? That's a big question. And Andrew Coyne has a very strong op-ed in the Globe and Mail today, saying what we have to do is not react to what we thought yesterday represented as a picture of the United States. It's only going to get worse. And we have to insulate ourselves, diminish our vulnerabilities. And there are two basic ways of doing that. One is what we do inside Canada, and that's premiers seem to be of one mind to work toward that, and building Canada out with a better position vis-a-vis intra-Canadian trade and all other sorts of things. Two, we have to try to reach out, and not for empathy on this subject, to other countries, to our allies, and to really start to commit to real substantive projects with them. You know, I obviously, we're going to have to, it's not a question of finding alternative markets. We need partners in infrastructure, partners in cooperation.
Jeremy Kinsman, appreciate your thoughts on what happened this afternoon. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Well, Canada's foreign minister was asked about the White House exchange, and Melanie Joly says Canada continues to support Ukraine and is now also focused on working to keep the G7 countries united.
We believe in supporting Ukraine. Our position has not changed. We think Ukrainians are fighting for their own freedoms, but also fighting for ours. And we know that President Putin has no red lines, and he is, if we don't have a good deal for Ukraine, if we're not supporting Ukraine, there's a real risk that President Putin will go back to Russia, rearm and reinvade Ukraine, which would become, again, a security threat for Ukraine, of course, but for NATO. And when we are talking about NATO, we're talking about us, of course. Now, what I would add to that is clearly the Russians are noting the interaction that happened today. And so our goal is to make sure that we can continue to support Ukrainians and that we can keep very strong G7 unity amidst all this unpredictability and sometimes even chaos.
The Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly. Now, we also today spoke with Ihor Michalchyshyn. He is the CEO and the Executive Director of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. Take a listen to his reaction to what happened in Washington and what he says he's now watching for after that heated exchange.
It was a disgraceful meeting, encounter today. And I think that this builds on the fears that the U.S. is increasingly an unreliable ally and on a number of fronts, and particularly on Ukraine. President Zelenskyy is a respected leader of his people in wartime, and the way he was treated by Vice President Vance and President Trump was just shocking. Our community here in Canada is trying to understand what role Canada will play in a peace deal negotiation, what kind of security guarantees Canada is prepared to contribute to an international deal. We're going to be very carefully watching to see what the European allies, particularly France, UK, and Germany, do. And with the G7 leadership of Canada and the upcoming summit, and the Americans being part of that, though they want Russia to be invited, which is also very shocking, I think we're going to be working closely to monitor what Ukraine is asking for and what Ukraine needs.
So you heard Ihor Michalchyshyn describe the meeting as disgraceful. As for the U.S. president, take a look at what Donald Trump put on his social media account today, saying, "It's amazing what comes through emotion, and I have determined that President Zelenskyy is not ready for peace if America is involved." He goes on to say, "He disrespected the United States in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back," says Trump, "when he is ready for peace."
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
Well, for his thoughts on all this, we're now joined by Daniel Bilak, a Ukrainian-Canadian lawyer who has fought on the front lines in Ukraine. Daniel, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
Listen, I want to begin first and foremost with your reaction to what we saw between Donald Trump and President Zelenskyy today.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look on either of them, I think. I think there's a lot of undercurrent of emotion in both men. There's a bit of a history. I think the magnitude of the moment may have caught up to them as well. But I'm hopeful that both are going to continue to see the larger picture in all of this and the importance of signing the minerals agreement and of working towards a peace arrangement. I found the post that or tweet that President Trump issued right after this meeting frankly wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, and sort of left the door open. So I think that there, it just shows also how important the entire issue of security agreements and guarantees are to not just to President Zelenskyy, but to the Ukrainian people. We understand very clearly that you cannot trust Vladimir Putin's word on anything. I mean, if his lips are moving, he's lying, and that if there are going to be any American or other companies coming in to partner with Ukraine on exploiting our mineral resources, business isn't going to come in unless there's a guarantee that they're not going to get bombed, and or that the Russians aren't going to invade and take all this away from them. So I think those guarantees are just as important for the United States at this stage and for President Trump as they are for Ukraine. Yeah. And I think that they'll have to have some sort of arrangement that they'll come up with, perhaps with our European allies as well.
Yeah, well, and that's yet to be seen, though, because, of course, the Ukrainian delegation was told to leave the White House after that exchange, so no deal has been signed yet. We'll have to see where that goes. But, how troubling is that exchange, though, given that the United States is now negotiating an end to the war with Russia and without Ukraine at the table?
Well, I mean, these are early days in the negotiation as well. I mean, there's still talks about talks more than anything else. I think part of them are already, the Americans are trying to feel out what their bilateral relationship with Russia can be. It's clear that you cannot have any final arrangement without Ukraine at the table, and probably the European allies at the table. So, it's early days for the administration. They're still finding their footing. 1 month into a term, into an administration's term, is not a long time. Still don't have all their people in place. A lot of stuff seems to be being made up as it goes along. We've seen inconsistencies in messaging and changes in direction and in rhetoric over matters. So I think that, somebody once said that, the problem is that people take Donald Trump literally instead of seriously, where you need to be taking him seriously, but not literally. And we've seen him backtrack on some of his earlier comments. It's all part of his particular and peculiar style of negotiation. And I think it's too early to jump to conclusions. I mean, we really have to hope that this spat today can be fixed, and they kiss and make up, and then we get the mineral deal signed, and we get that process back on track, because that's Ukraine's path to the table, actually. Mm-hmm. And if the American economic interests are aligned with Ukraine's economic interests, then that could be a powerful stimulus.
Okay, Dmitry Medvedev is a name that former president and prime minister of Russia, and I'm going to read to you a social media post that he shared this afternoon after the exchange, and this is what he wrote: "The insolent pig," referring to Zelenskyy, finally got a proper slapdown in the Oval Office, and Donald Trump is right. The Kyiv regime is gambling with World War III. What do you say to that?
Well, he's also the alcoholic in chief in the Kremlin. But leaving that aside, his job is to lay out really outlandish and bombastic statements. It also points to the fact that, frankly, some of President Trump's comments do reflect comments that he's heard from the Russians, and I think that sets President Zelenskyy off. I think that's a trigger for him, and it's understandable why that is so. To the extent that the Russians are influencing White House behavior and thinking, I think it's far too early to draw definitive conclusions. Would we like to see this being dealt with in more conventional ways? Perhaps. But I can tell you that the conventional ways of doing things under the Biden administration wasn't working out for us that well. I mean, we were getting basically a drip down effect, drip line effect of weapons deliveries. That drip feed basically was killing us. We were always getting enough to survive, but never enough to win. With Donald Trump, there's a lot of uncertainty, but I think the Ukrainian people probably feel that there's probably more hope, ironically enough, and that reflects the particularly difficult circumstances in which we find ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean that Donald Trump is right when he says the Ukrainian people are losing faith in Zelenskyy?
Well, I think that any president 3 years into a war, his ratings are going to be affected because people have suffered a great degree. People want things over. But, the last poll that took place, which from my sense is accurate, showed him with 57% of the people supporting him across the country. And that's more than a buoyant result to continue to move forward. Had I been President Zelenskyy, I probably would not have responded at all to what Vice President Vance was saying, and that probably would have wrapped up the press conference. But it's a trigger for him, and Putin is Satan, and we have suffered tremendous atrocities from murders, rapes, whole cities being reduced to rubble, displacement of millions, tens of millions of people. Ukrainians have suffered tremendously, and the pressure that President Zelenskyy has as the leader of that nation, working 24/7 for 3 years, have got to be just heroically and Herculean in terms of its weight on his shoulders.
Daniel Bilak, always appreciate the time with you. Thank you for this today.
Thank you. God bless. Thanks to the people of Canada for your support.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Friday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back next week. Until then, have a great weekend.
Leonard Thompson, 13 years old, diabetes mellitus,